Now in the Zelda series, magic is quite a normal thing. It's seen almost everywhere in the world being used for various things. And in the series, we have seen two wizards who were able to wield great power and used it to destroy Hyrule, which didn't really turn out too well. I'm of course talking about Vaati and Yuga, two big villains seen in the Zelda games who got their hands on relics that are beyond our mortal comprehension. But if those two would fight each other in a one-on-one battle, then who would come out as the winner? Well, today we will find out. So let's dive into this right away. Now in one corner we have Yuga, an evil sorcerer and one of the two primary antagonists of A Link Between Worlds. At the beginning of the game, he hunts the descendants of the Seven Sages from Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past, as well as Princess Zelda. He does this because he wants to resurrect Ganon and use his power to rule the worlds of Hyrule and Lorule, and ultimately taking his place among the gods, which he does succeed in to an extent. However, for this battle, we won't use his Ganon-empowered form, since it's basically a different fight. Now his trademark attribute is that he can transform himself and others into two-dimensional art. Using his magic wand, he can trap people into picture frames, turning them into paintings that he can simply pick up and run off with. A bit of a weird strategy to be honest, but it's at least something different. Now in the other corner we have Vaati, and much like Ganondorf, he appears in both a humanoid and monstrous form. And in the first game where we saw him in, known as the Minish Cap, Vaati also takes on 3 other forms, including that of a Minish. Now at first he was one of those tiny creatures, a Minish, being the apprentice of a powerful sorcerer known as Aslo in this former life. And over time he became fascinated with the evil in the hearts of men and began to desire power, becoming fascinated by the light force, which is a powerful artifact similar to the triforce. He ends up stealing a powerful item made by Aslo known as the Mage's Cap, which grants the wishes of anyone who wears it. And so Vaati, our evil sorcerer, was born, ready to take over the world of Hyrule. However, now that we know some things about these mighty villains, who is the more powerful one? The one with the superior magical skills? Well, let's look into it using the following points: powers, health, and ability to adapt to the situation. Now let's start with our very first point, their powers. Who has more of them and can cast the stronger ones? Now let's start with Yuga. Now, as you would expect of someone of his, physique, this little man relies mostly on his great feats of magic and not raw power. He can merge with walls as a painting, create pillars of fire on the walls, summon lightning from his staff, and while in the walls he can create duplicates of himself that transform into standard knights if attacked. Clearly quite an impressive lineup of abilities. However, this isn't where it ends, because he has one more extremely special ability. Because he also possesses a power to absorb other beings, augmenting their powers into his own, allowing him to become even more powerful. He does this in the game with Ganondorf, which allows him to use his mighty trident, triforce of power, and physical strength. Now his opponent Vaati is also no joke. He has displayed the ability to transfigure people or turn them into stone, and transfigure himself so as to impersonate others. He can also teleport at will, summon monsters, and even transform the whole of Hyrule Castle into a dark version of its former self. But it doesn't end there. He isn't just good at magic, because in the Minish Cap he also won the annual sword fighting tournament during the Pokori Festival in record time using incredible techniques. Although it is unknown if he performed these feats using magic or actual sword skill, but it does at least show what he can do. Now he also gets more powers when he absorbs a part of the light force, displaying a variety of magic-based attacks, and eventually transforms himself into a monstrous winged orb with a single red eye. And he remains in this form during Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures, and also displays the ability to create cyclones in those titles. So both of them have some insane abilities. However, who has the best ones? Well, this isn't actually too hard, because while Yuga is incredibly powerful, his opponent is on an entirely different level just because of the Mage's Cap. This thing makes Vaati so incredibly strong that he can change the world around him completely, which Yuga could never really counter. Vaati is already on a demigod level while Yuga isn't. Sure, he can merge people into walls, but a magic caster like Vaati can most likely deal with this. And worst case scenario, he can turn Yuga into stone. So in my opinion, Vaati is much stronger, just because he can match any of Yuga's spells and do even more than that. So clearly he wins this round. His magical abilities are incredible, to be honest. Now let's move on to the next segment, health. How tough are these enemies really? Well, one is certainly a lot more resilient compared to the other. In the games, we fight Yuga a couple of times, and he does put up a real battle when Link fights him in A Link Between Worlds. However, he doesn't have a lot of tricks up his sleeve. He doesn't even have any phases and goes down after around 15-ish swipes from a sword. Only when he merges together with Ganondorf to become one powerful creature, he truly becomes stronger. Before that, he is rather weak. Sure, his attacks are still great and he can do a lot of damage, but he can't take a lot of damage, which is fitting for his body type. He's physically quite weak, so of course when you start to beat the hell out of him, he goes down rather quick. So in this category, Yuga is at a huge disadvantage, to be honest, and only manages to overcome this after Ganondorf gives him more physical strength. But when it comes to Vaati, we can see that he's a lot tougher, and his abilities allow him to get hit less, because teleporting away is a pretty good strategy to dodge your foes. And this also goes for being able to fly, which he can do in one of his forms. So this already gives him an edge. But it doesn't end there, because he also has multiple phases in a lot of his fights, and can clearly take more hits than Yuga. Link even attacks him in a lot of the games with the fully powered up Force Sword, and it still takes ages for him to go down, while Yuga already yields after taking a relatively low number of hits from a normal sword that has no magical powers. So this already shows how much tougher he is in normal combat circumstances, which isn't just the case in the Minish Cap even, but multiple games. Clearly, Vaati once again takes the medal in this category. So now it all comes down to the very last point, their ability to adapt to the situation. And whether they can do this or not completely depends on their own powers and what they are up against. And sadly enough, the odds, aren't great for Yuga once again. And that's just because Vaati has some crazy powers which his rival just doesn't have. But there's even more to it. We know Yuga can cast some straight up damage spells like Thunderbolt, summon some enemies and merge into walls, but that's about it. While Vaati can do a lot of those things as well by using other types of spells. For example, turning people into stone, summoning any type of enemy, and a whole lot more. Heck, the cap he wears can basically grant any wish, and it doesn't seem to be limited in any way, since it can even transform the entirety of Hyrule Castle. So Vaati's options are basically endless, allowing him to counter any attack Yuga performs in order to beat him. He sadly enough has no chance of winning, and then Vaati also has the option of going close combat, since he can apparently use melee weapons, which is another thing Yuga can't really deal with. It was extremely effective for Link after all, so I think we all know who the winner would be in a fight like this. Vaati. He would destroy Yuga in quite a short amount of time. The only way I see him winning is if he merges with Ganondorf. Then he has a lot more attacks and can also handle a lot more punishment. If he does that, then it would be a great fight, because Vaati would have a bit of a harder time. The triforce of power is no joke after all. However, that would change the entire fight, to be honest. It's Yuga versus Vaati after all, not Ganondorf and Yuga versus Vaati, so sadly enough we cannot give him that edge whatsoever. And if you find that unfair, then that's fine, but I won't include it in this battle at all. And if you really want to make it fair, then you could say that Vaati's light force form shouldn't be included as well, which is fine. But even if we got to completely ignore that, then he is still way stronger than Yuga, so even that won't save him, making Vaati our winner for sure. And a battle between them could look like this. Yuga starts off with the wall merging and cloning himself, since it's a good way to confuse his foe. However, Vaati can change almost anything around him, so he could also change the arena in such a way that the wall merging is pretty much impossible. For example, creating some sort of pit around all the walls, so that when he pops out of it, he will fall to his doom. This would already make it really tough for Yuga. His main trick is now useless, and so he decides to summon some foes, which is again useless because Vaati can do the exact same. He's even able to summon more powerful ones like moblins. So then all he has left is casting some sort of damaging spell, but that would also end badly because Vaati can also do this. Heck, he can even summon a mini tornado launching Yuga up into the air, after which he will come down hitting the ground hard. Clearly Vaati got this in the bag, so let's hope that these two never have to fight, because it would be a rather boring battle. Well, I think at least.